Hey, hey, hey. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, I am so glad you're here. It has been a long week, and I have something on my face that says, please tell me about your problems and your concerns, and I might be helpful. I have not always had it. In fact, this week, one of my former employees, I don't know how else to say that, he reported to me, and I was his leader in 2009. He commented on one of my posts about empathy and said, were you empathetic towards me when we worked together? And my heart sank because the answer to that question is no. No, I was not. And I was honest to say that no, I had not been empathetic. And then I also followed up to say that I guess it was defending. I started sharing that my journey of empathy did not start until really when my mom died, and not truly then. I was just kind of getting in touch with my emotions a little bit then. Um, and then, yeah, so I thought about it all day. I shared it with a couple people I love that he had commented it in that way on my post. And then I came back the next morning and I just said, I'm sorry. Um, I wish I had known better, because there's no telling how many people I hurt while I was not practicing empathy when I was myself a leader. And in 2022, when I decided to pivot my business from teaching leaders how to just be better generally at leadership, like how to be more emotionally intelligent, which includes being inclusive and creating a sense of belonging, teaching leaders how to make sure that the different people on their team feel included. I came to this really quick realization that none of that was going to work if people did not have empathy. And I know when I say empathy, I got to find a better word, because when people hear it, they think that somehow you're going to be nice. So you got to be kind. And I believe we should be kind to people. But we are struggling even with that. And so I am trying to tap into the mental capacity that people have to see if we can get them to mentally um, do better if they don't emotionally feel it. And listen, I have a lot of unfinished psychological business. I was talking to my therapist yesterday. I was trying to demand something and wanting to push someone to do something that I believe they needed to do. And my therapist was like, okay, let's be clear about what your boundary is. You can expect all kinds of things. And if somebody doesn't want to do it, they don't want to do it. There's no reason to push. But why do I bring that up? Because I bring it up because there's lots of people right now who are feeling angry, who are feeling lonely, who are feeling hurt, and who are tired. And I have a general rule that if I am hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or hurt, that I am not going to run my mouth. And so it took me a little while today to get online, because I wanted to make sure that I was not hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or hurt while I'm talking with you. And I was reminded that during the height of all of the education that was happening after George Floyd, people found their way to Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, who had written Stamp from the Beginning, massive book. And in it, he says that basically we have not made racial progress, that every amount of racial progress has been followed by a regression, that as we take 2 steps forward, we take 3 steps back. And he goes through the course of US history explaining. But what I love about Dr. Ibram X. Kendi and what he did in that book is he did something that I value. And that is, he opened up talking about how he had racist ideas, how he as a Black man used to stand in churches and say things that were disparaging to Black people. And what that does, and why I like it, is that it helps people know that you are there with them too. It creates a shared experience. And if there was one thing that I regularly criticized during like 2020 through 2022, when everybody and their mama was saying that, yes, they were working to be anti-racist and starting book clubs and not reading the books and not going That's the side conversation. What many people would do once they had learned something is then just start judging other people instead of saying, hey, listen, this is where I used to be and here's where I am now. Oftentimes people think that I am incredibly transparent. I really am not. My therapist says that I am open. I am not vulnerable. I share things that I think are common human experiences, but they are not things that I find that cause me to be in a vulnerable position. And one of them that I've talked about often is how my positions have changed over time for the LGBTQ community. And I probably lose some people right now because we will take all of the oppressive things that are done to us and we will do that same thing to other people. If you need an example, just talk to an adult about young folks. Older people will consistently disparage these young people today, and they remember being young. One of the only demographics where you end up in an oppressed group that you used to be a part of is adulthood. There's no way to get to adulthood unless you have been a child first. And yet when we get to be adults, we then put the hammer down on. And so I get it if you don't want to hear me talk about LGBTQ people today, but I'm going to, because I was raised in Christian faith that said that God said it was sinful. And I believe that same thing, right? Like I believe that same thing. And I believed it because that is what people told me God said. And so then what did I do? I sit there silently, not really having a position about when a preacher would start talking about how homosexuality is sin. And I know that's not part of the sermon series because I'm at church every Sunday. So I know what the sermon series is. You just preaching about this topic because somebody gay happened to be visiting that day. And if you think about that, you invite somebody into your home, and every church says all are welcome. I haven't seen a church that actually says that some people aren't welcome, even though we know this to be true, that you are not welcome in certain edifices. No, nobody has that on the wall that some people ain't welcome. We say all people are welcome. But then when some people show up, how do we treat them? Right? Like, how do you treat them? So you invite somebody in your home, you're going to be rude to them. That was probably the first time that I started to go, this don't feel right. And then if I fast forward, there are probably many other little small things, but as I fast forward, I was working in corporate, and I was working with a man named Frank, and Frank had been married to his partner for 20 years, and I was going through a divorce. It was my second one, believe it or not. And my husband at the time, even though we were not living together, we had not talked to each other for months, he was still my husband, so he still got my benefits. But sitting next to me, Frank and his husband did not have benefits, and they had been together for 20 years. Something about that didn't feel right. And then when Frank and I would go out to the manufacturing facilities to teach, I would see Frank try to adjust himself, change his clothes, change the tenor of his voice to take it up a little lower. I take it down actually a little lower to try to talk deeper, to not be his free self. And something about that just didn't feel right to me. So I just stopped talking about it, but I didn't take any stance. And then my mama died. And there was a woman who my mother used to use all the time for her carpentry work. Her name was Jackie. And if you've been following me for any length of time, you've heard me talk about Jackie. And Jackie was absolutely lesbian. If you did not know her, it was hard to know that she was a woman. She looked like a very small man. And when my mom died, she didn't have much work here. So she moved back home to the South. She had not been there for 2 months when a man had sat in his congregation listening to the preacher say that God did not make Adam and Eve, or Adam and Steve, God made Adam and Eve, and all other hateful adages that tend to come from the bully pulpit. And this man, because he was not well, left that church service, went to Jackie's home, raped her, and stabbed her 139 times, killing her. So when people see me taking up for people in the LGBTQ community, when all someone did was say something that was hateful. What happens for me is that I see Jackie. If God did not make Adam and Steve, who did make them? And I believe that after that event, connecting with people in the LGBTQ employee resource group and learning more about people's lives, paying attention to the reality of what I'm seeing in front of me. Who among us does not know a child, a girl we call a tomboy, and you know that child does not identify as female in the same way that other women do. And so we act surprised when later she is lesbian. And it's like, to learn about chromosomes is actually quite complicated. It is not as simple as I have been taught and as I have believed. And so I think as we are trying to level our limbic systems and not be overwhelmed by the flood, it is important that if you're going to speak about something, just be open to learning about it. Just be open to learning about it. I just read Faces at the Bottom of a Well again. Another book that says this, I think the subtitle is the Permanence of Racism in America. It could be a very depressing book, if you look at the history of how we have behaved against each other based on skin color. It could be very depressing. But I am reminded of a couple of events that kind of stand out to me. I watched Titanic, 3-hour-long movie. And as the ship is going down, there's the musicians who are still playing. I would like to think that that is a way to handle your ultimate death. But I'd also like to think that another way to handle it is to know the ship is going down, still try to find you a plank or something to hold on to, still try to find a life vest if there is one, still try, right? Like, I don't know what I would do, but I'd like to think I'd be a person who's still trying. I'm not going to disparage the person who wants to play some music as the ship goes down. But I'd like to think that that's not me. And when I consider Ukraine, come down on the issue wherever you want to come down on it. I don't actually know that much about international affairs, and I'm not going to act like I do. You can't know about everything, and I think we would do well to be honest about that. But when those battleships were facing their country, when the Russians had battleships all around, and I saw the Ukrainians going to brunch and loving on their children and having games, I wondered, like, are they not worried about this? It felt very much like the musicians on the deck of the Titanic. And then when Russia started to actually take action on what they were doing, people acted surprised. And I'm bringing that up because I am not a historian. It just so happens that once you live 49 years, you have lived history. I love to be future focused about what we can do next. When people say, can we just forget that thing? Well, I can't forget stuff that I actually saw with my own eyes. Listen, I am not that old. And when I would spend my summers in Coahoma County, Mississippi, what I would see looked very much like sharecropping. And we're talking about the 1980s. When the government bombs its own city during my lifetime because the people there are criminals, I have seen it with my own eyes. And so now I believe that these things can happen again. You don't have to go back 200 years or 400 years. In my 49 years, I have seen enough to let us know how horrible we can be to each other. And I bring this up because I do not like to be a person who says, man, I told you so. But I spent 9 weeks reading Project 2025 and I was horrified. We listened to people tell us they had nothing to do with it who were the authors of the document. And so I bring it up not because I'm tired. I'm not tired today. Not because I'm angry. I think I'm starting to get a little numb actually. Because every day, while we have the richest 1% of our country, we're about to make a trillionaire here. I can't even get my mind around those numbers, and I happen to be an engineer. Folks who have hundreds of millions of dollars, I'm talking the richest 100 people, got us fighting each other because you don't think somebody should be gay. Because you think Black people taking your spot. Because you think immigrants are making the country worse. Because you think you should be able to control how a woman's body performs. Because you believe that you know everything there is to know about Christianity when there are over 300,000 different denominations. And all I'm saying is, if there's a flood outside, don't stand out there with your water hose on. That's it. And when there are massive challenges to tackle, I'm the first one that balks when someone tries to make the solution simple. But the strategies of hatefulness are pretty simple. Distract you. And if you ain't distracted, you must not be on social media. You must not be watching the news. You must not be talking to people at work. You must not be impacted at all in any way by any of these laws, but either by the terrorists, either by none of your neighbors is running scared, nothing. It's possible, I guess. And once I get you distracted, divide you on any number of issues, divide you on NFL teams, divide you on whether or not somebody is a martyr, divide you on religion, divide you on abortion, divide you on sexual orientation, divide you on immigrant status, veteran status, divide you on what minority institutions should be funded or not, divide you. Because if I can divide you, then I can destroy you. And here's my hope. My hope is that the lawyers who are doing something, the ones who are like, listen, we're not playing the violin on the Titanic. We are going to smother the White House in lawsuits. It's the only thing that seems like it's effective. And I wish I could tell you something like that to do. But all I have for today is, my love, your enemy is not beside you. That is not your enemy. And if you believe that you must speak up and out about an issue, just make sure you know what you're talking about. Because too often we get our microphones and we start spewing stuff we don't know. And I'd hate for you to cause a bunch of damage and harm, because your words are powerful. Your words are incredibly, incredibly powerful. And if you want to make this better, why don't we start thinking about how we can focus on something that can pull people together, that we can unite around the things for which we agree, and that we can build something better than this nonsense that's happening right now. If what makes you feel good is playing your violin on the deck of the Titanic, I hope you don't hear judgment from me. But what you hear is, I believe the beautiful thing about humans is that we do have the choice to do something different than what we've always done. We got the choice. We have the choice. And if there's something you know you wouldn't say publicly to a group of people to their faces, why don't you think twice about typing it out on social media? I don't personally know how to stop this train. I believe I did what I could before the election to keep us from getting here. But what I will invite and offer up to you is that I am not going to stand outside with my water hose on, making it worse. They're trying to push a crime bill right now that would decimate young people, reinforce the school to prison pipeline that we have spent years trying to dismantle. I believe everyone who's following me right here is probably an adult because the young people are on other social media platforms. Just be better, do better, lift up, hold up, because hatefulness certainly knows how to come together. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. We got work to do.